Hello, BookTube. I'm here to talk about The Masters. It is the fifth book chronologically in C.P. Snow's Strangers and Brothers series. It was published in 1951. It was the fourth book published, but the fifth chronologically, as I say. Now, like its predecessor, The Light and the Dark, it is set, for the most part, well, all of it, in a Cambridge college. And in this case, it's loosely based on Christ's College that C.P. Snow went to. Now, whereas The Light and the Dark spans 1935 to 1943, mostly dealing with Lewis Eliot's relationship and friendship, close friendship with Roy Calvert up until his death. This one has Roy Calvert as well, but it's mostly confined to 1937, where they find out that the current master, Royce, is dying. He has terminal cancer, and they need to elect a new master. Now, they don't know. They know it's a terminal cancer, but they don't know how long it's going to be. So he does linger for quite a while. And he doesn't even know that he's terminally ill until much later. His wife decides to, and doctor, I believe it is, decides to withhold that information from him. And that makes it very difficult on everybody else in the college because they have to go see him and pretend that he's going to be getting better. Now, there's two candidates that sort of rise to the top, Crawford and Jago. Lewis and Roy and a few others, they back Jago. Not because he's the best candidate, but that he's probably the best human being of the two. Crawford is very... well, he's a scientist. He's well thought of, and so that's a plus to the other scientific minded in the college. The professors and fellows. Now, it's got to do with them maneuvering and politically maneuvering and trying to gain more votes for each of them, like each one, but mostly through the eyes of Lewis Eliot's. So they try to talk others into voting for Jago, but it becomes a rift between Lewis and his friend Francis Getliff, who becomes sort of a little angry at him because he's backing Jago, because this is the time where Hitler is rising and there's a lot of appeasement going on. So Getliff feels that they need a master, a leader that will not appease Hitler. And he feels that Jago would. Also, Jago has a wife that is not well thought of, and she's maligned throughout the story. She is a little on the innocent side in some ways, because she thinks it's going to happen. That they're gonna that her husband Jago is going to get the mastership. But yeah, so it's a back and forth thing, them talking and why each one is better, and it turns out for a large part of the story that it's a tie, and there's one person that can break the tie, but he's the oldest fellow, and he's in charge of making sure everything is done by statutes. There's lots of statutes that say how this goes about, how the voting happens, when it starts, and everything like that. But because they've got a an inkling of, that it's going to happen in the near future, they start the maneuvering. Each side starts its maneuvering. And there's one person that becomes a traitor in many ways. He decides to go to the other side, and so it becomes almost impossible for Lewis's side, Jago, to win. And it just comes out like the people's petty grievances with each other, and rivalries just all come to the surface. And it talks about that it'll take years for everything to settle back down to normality. And we do find out that Crawford does win in the end after the old master dies. Sort of, it's a type of thing where you respect the old master, but then you put everything towards the new master. And it happens all within the 1 year, basically 1937, as I say, because it's a penultimate sort of year for things that are happening in England and in Europe, and getting geared up for war. Now, it ends very differently than other ones. Lewis goes into, in the final chapter, a history of sort of almost Cambridge University and colleges, and talks about how the colleges started as basically boarding for the students, and with a senior sort of professor or lecturer as sort of overseeing everything. And then it grew, and then they became sort of more powerful in many ways than the university itself. And they took over a lot of the teaching, the lecturing, and everything, and until it sort of starts going back the other way. It's an interesting. It's something that I've always wanted to learn more about, is the history of colleges, or Cambridge University and Oxford University. And I do have some books about that I've picked up over the years since I've been here, but I've never delved into it. So a lot of what he was talking about sort of didn't quite make a lot of sense. Like, it made sense, but it was like, well, that's kind of strange. How did that happen? And he C.P. Snow takes it for granted that you do know the sort of general history of things. But it's a very interesting final chapter. It's a bit jarring from the story, but I just love the way he intertwines these books, because this is happening. This whole book, 45 pages, 345 pages, during the time of are part of the time of Light in the Dark. And they do mention the Light and the Dark, in the Light and the Dark, about the Master. And it is explored a little bit, but it's not in detail. They don't get into the nitty-gritty of, C.P. Snow doesn't get into the nitty-gritty of the maneuvering and backstabbing and all this stuff that happens in here. Well, which would happen, but it's more detailed in the Masters. And I kind of like it. And it's like, it's hard to sort of see if there's any faults with it, because you would have to read, this and then go back as you're halfway through, read in Light in the Dark, because I don't remember all the details, but it seems like it works. It actually works, because there's references back and forth to things that happen in each of these. Because when Roy, makes an outburst, that's in here. It's dealt more fully in Light in the Dark. And when he goes to, I think it's Vienna the first time, or no, he was going to the Vatican Library. It's dealt a little more in the Light in the Dark, and also to his sort of black times, his dark times of mental illness, is dealt more fully in The Light and the Dark. But here it's mentioned, and it fits in, I believe, with everything else. But anyway, again, this is, like, I did look at, because I noticed when I was looking for something else, I think several books back, that they do quote on Wikipedia from Kirkus Reviews about the books. And this whoever reviewed this sort of said that, I sort of paraphrase it, that there are very slow moments in it. You don't really need to know the other books before, but it helps place everything. And there are slow bits, yeah, but I don't mind that. That's the thing. And the same thing was said about The Light and the Dark. And that's where I go now, to look to see if there's, you know, there's a review a little bit regarding the book, and see what others have said. And yeah, I don't know. It just works for me. Even the slow parts, I don't mind them. And this was the very first Strangers and Brothers book that I read. 'Cause I can envision, I can remember going into the bookshop, and you go up the steps, and along the right-hand side, it was all sort of fiction, you know, literature, paperbacks. And I was just going through, just pulling stuff off, and I saw the Masters, the Penguin, you know, the Orange Penguin edition, and I read the back, and I thought, like, oh yeah, that's definitely, I'm interested in that. So I read it, and then, well, after I got home, I realized it was part of a series, but I read it anyway, and loved it, and then went back and bought all that I could find of the whole series there. And then I think I eventually pieced everything together, and then sat down and just read it in, like, the whole series in a week or two. I got so much into this series that I unplugged the phone. I got enough food in for, like, the week. You know, I think after this one, I realized I was going to love it. So I went out and bought food, everything I needed for a week, and I just locked myself up, closed the curtains, and said goodbye to the world for like a week or more, until I read through everything. And it was glorious. And I used to do that occasionally, but not that often. And it had to be something special, but this was special. And I just love just getting into this world and just soaking in it, from beginning to end. And I definitely want to read, like, it's like, I've been asked, like, what order I should read this in. People are saying, like, you know, chronologically or publication. I like chronological, but this is such a one that, because they overlap, you can not read them chronologically and it'll work. I usually flip. I can't remember how I read it the first time. I probably read it publication order the first time, and then I switched to chronological, and then the last time I read it was publication order, and then I'm reading it chronologically this time. The next time I read it, it'll probably be publication order, just to change things up a little bit. So anyway, so yeah, so flip a coin, whichever one you would like. You know, I would say chronologically is nice because you do get the flow of everything. You get, you know, the early days and time of hope of Lewis Eliot, where if you do it publication, you won't get that until a little later. But then that works as well, because you get to like the character and you go, oh, what are his origins? And then you go back. So yeah. Anyway, the next book, I don't have it to hand, but it's called The New Men. And I've got to catch up because this is May's, so I've got to catch up with it. But hopefully I will. It's a shorter book, so I don't know if I can fit it in this month, but July is going to be more or less my catch-up month for what I missed at the end of April and through May. At least that's the idea. That's the hope. Thank you, BookTube, and yes, this is a fabulous series, and I have no problem with recommending it unreservedly. Thank you, BookTube.